Thanks for Lashade. And I was saying before, I don't know whether you heard me, I was thanking the organizers for getting me to be part of this presentation, and also pointing out that I had visited the website of the ASB and was very impressed with the amount of work that has been done down in the history. And I'm pleased that I was associated with this particular first online symposium. And thank you for Lashade for keeping the line open, and Farah Nyabaza for contacting me to this. Like Stephen said, I studied in Oxford, and I did models for pattern formation in mesenchymal morphogenesis. But when I returned to Cameroon, I was hit by malaria, and it became clear that I should join the fight against malaria. And so that's where I ended up with malaria modeling and mosquito dynamics. So I will be talking today about the dynamics of mosquito populations with applications to malaria. And I'm much more interested in deriving the model that we have. And I would point you somewhere we can find more information as to what is going to happen. I'm going to give the outline of this presentation in 6 parts, but there will be 6 short parts. I'll briefly describe the mosquito biology, and I will introduce the modeling framework that we have used. And then I would show somewhere in the process the application in malaria modeling. So let's start with the mosquito. The mosquito is a family of flies that are capable of interacting with humans. We know about 3,600 species of mosquitoes that can interact with humans, but only about 3,306, 10% of these can carry disease. The other thing that we know about mosquitoes is that they undergo complete metamorphosis, and that is they have two distinct different distinct life forms, which occupy different niche and ecological environments. And different people see mosquitoes in different ways. For example, if you look at evolutionary biologists, they will see mosquitoes as micropredators, while parasitologists will see mosquitoes as disease vectors. All mosquitoes drink nectar from flowers. Females of some species have, in addition, adapted to drink blood. If you see a mosquito feeding, you can tell because the abdomen slowly distends as it gorges itself. And you can actually see the color of the abdomen changes. And normally it looks, this is an enlarged picture because we want to wonder whether the amount of blood a mosquito takes can be harmful to the human. The mosquitoes drink blood from vertebrate hosts, which include humans and non-humans. So goats, fowls, anything that has warm blood is good enough. Only females take blood meals for reproduction, and the female's first blood meal is about the second day of life, of adult life. And then she can lay eggs every 3 to 4 days. These are important facts which I would like us to be able to capture in the modeling that we are going to present here. Why do mosquitoes drink blood? It's a behavioral trait that has been hardwired into the reproductive cycle. And because they need the blood for the development of their eggs, and the source of the nutrient in the blood is a protein that they need. And so they have to take blood. It is not because mosquitoes want to transmit diseases that they bite humans. It's because they need the blood. The life cycle of the mosquito, as I said, is complete metamorphosis. The adult lays eggs, which hatch in about 2 to 3 days, and the eggs mature into a larva. The larva matures into a pupa, which later on hatches into an adult. And the entire cycle from egg to adult is about between 7 and 20 days, depending on the temperature. Now, what this means is that if we were going to start modeling mosquito dynamics, we must consider temperature effects, we must consider climate. And the other important fact is that the eggs can remain unhatched in hibernation mode for longer periods of time. And therefore, even when the environment is not conducive, the species can be preserved through the eggs. Like I said, you look at this life cycle, it has two parts. We have the upper half, which shows this picture from the American Mosquito Control Association. It shows that the adult lives on land and the other part lives in water. So there are two different living environments. When it comes to insects and most organisms that reproduce by instinct, maintaining appropriate seasonality is really, really an important requirement. So critical life history events must occur at the appropriate time to optimize chances of survival. It would not be advantageous for the mosquito to lay eggs at the time when there's no water. And so what that means is that if we're looking at the time evolution, oscillations, including periodicity, are aspects that we must be able to measure. And if we actually want to capture this, in the past, what has been done is that they'll use seasonal forcing. And people have asked questions, why do mosquito populations persist? There are several answers which you can give, some of which are just because it is a tenacious organism, but climate change means that higher temperatures means that mosquitoes can live longer. And mosquitoes are becoming resistant to insecticides and since 1947. And then the other aspect is that there is the issue of economic and politics, wars, immigration, low research funding, poor healthcare systems means that sanitary conditions are a bit low. And so the mosquito can survive in these conditions here. The malaria parasite is transmitted from human to human by the Anopheles species mosquito. For the parasite to move from one human to another, a single mosquito must bite two humans twice at distinct points in time. So the mosquito must come and take the infection from the human, go and nurture it, and then transfer it to another human at a different point in time. So this single mosquito must survive these two encounters. And we actually note that the female Anopheles mosquito bites humans only for the sole purpose of harvesting blood that she needs for her eggs. She doesn't hate humans in any way. And for a mosquito to bite a human, it must actively seek the human host. And we know that they do systematically target and identify humans. And once attracted, they can bite as many times as possible until they get the desired amount of blood. Some species of mosquitoes prefer human blood. We call those kind anthropophilic. Some prefer animal blood. We call them zoophilic. Others prefer to bite humans indoors, endophagic, and outdoors, others bite outdoor, exophagic. But whatever mode of biting and feeding has been chosen, once a good blood meal is taken, the mosquito moves to a convenient resting place where it rests for the blood to digest. And once the resting period is over, it again searches for a convenient breeding site, usually a swamp or humid area where she lays her eggs. The questions that we want to answer are questions like, what is the choice of a breeding site to go to, and what is the choice of a host to feed on? But preferences for a particular swamp depends on distance from the resting place and perhaps also on safety from predators. What consequences do we have when a mosquito interacts with a human? Well, the human loses blood to the mosquito. That is, but the amount of blood that goes to the mosquito is so small that it cannot be cause of concern. The human may be infected with a disease if the mosquito is infected, and the human gets irritation, which at times can be painful. Mosquitoes harvest more needed blood from the human if that is the one thing that goes for the mosquito, and the mosquito may lose its life if the human becomes aggressively protective. And we have been protective. We have designed measures of protecting ourselves against mosquitoes, creating bed nets, and so on. So every time a mosquito goes to bite a human, it can die in the process. But one of the things that accrues to the mosquito very, very truly is that the mosquito can reproduce upon successful acquisition of a blood meal. So the cost of taking that risk is very, very small to the mosquito compared to the risk of dying. Now that we know about the mosquito, let's see how we can put that information into the mathematical modeling that we have, we are doing. We assume that the mosquito has a human biting habit. In other words, it's a habit that has to happen. We assume that the mosquitoes and humans are confined in a particular geographic area small enough so that every human being can be visited by any mosquito. This is a very weak assumption, and it is really almost untenable, but it translates to the fact that since the mosquito is the one that actively seeks to bite humans, we are kind of trying to model a form of homogeneous mixing based on the idea that the mosquito has a human biting habit. And so it's a homogeneous mixing, but it is directed by the fact that the mosquito has a human biting habit. The general objective that we have in this paper I'm presenting here is to develop a mathematical model for the population dynamics of organism, which I have called a disease vector that interacts with humans but breeds outside the human at distinct spatial location called breeding sites. The human stays at what we call human habitat. That is the general objective. And so if we take this big objective, it means that we can transpose this model we are developing for any vector-borne disease, which not only mosquitoes, we can kind of talk about snails for schistosomiasis, we can talk about other vector-borne diseases. The first minor objective is to attempt to capture the reproductive gains that accrue to the mosquito because of the interaction with humans. Most models do not capture these reproductive gains that accrue to the mosquito. And the second minor objective would be to see whether we can capture oscillatory dynamics that are known to exist in dynamics of mosquito population without seasonal forcing. So these are we have the main objective and the two minor objectives. The mathematical model that we have there's a general model which has three stages: the aquatic forms which are the juvenile forms of the mosquito. And these aquatic forms, they live in water environment. The terrestrial forms, these are the adult forms of the insect, and they can come in two types: the adult males and the adult females. The adult fertilized female terrestrial forms are studied according to spatial location. In other words, the vector fertilized females can be either at the breeding site, at the questing place, or a resting place. I'm going to talk about this more later. And the adult fertilized female can either prefer to feed on a human or on a non-human. All of them are warm-blooded. And so I have here a diagram that shows the general framework of this general framework. And you actually see that it is divided into the aquatic stages denoted by A, B, which we'll call B, fertilized female, which can either go to quest in animals I apologize for that. It's really above my control.
I understand.
I was describing that the model that we're going to present to you here is the simplified model, which is based on the terrestrial component of the vectors. And vectors of type R are places what we call resting places. When the mosquito takes the blood meal, it rests so that it can reproduce. It can for the eggs to mature. Mosquitoes of type Q are what we call questing places. That is where they take for blood. They quest for blood. and mosquito of type B at what we call breeding places, breeding sites. And so in this framework, we have 3 locations where we can target mosquito control: the place where they are resting, the place where they are questing, and the place where they are breeding. And it's an important distinction from the framework that has been used before to model mosquito populations. And so mosquitoes of type B get attracted to humans at a certain rate, beta B of NH, and they interact with humans at a certain exposure rate, beta, and they become mosquitoes of type R, which lay eggs that produce new adult. They enter the B class and they return to the breeding site to breed. That's the simple framework. And it gives us the question that we want to ask is, that we want to answer here is, how do we measure the next generation of mosquitoes from the present generation? And it looks on the from current to next generation, the new adult mosquito eclosion rate. It looks like we have a discrete problem, but in reality, we try to use a continuous model approach to address this discrete problem. We have the current generation of adult mosquitoes that we want to skip the aquatic stage and try to ask ourselves how many new adults come because of this current generation. I start from a first principle modeling approach, which requires that I start at the breeding site. If I let E pi of T be the density of X present at the breeding site at time pi, that are still present as X at time T, then I can write down an expectation of the number of X that are still present at time T, which were initially present at time pi, by this exponential decay function here. It's nothing new here. It is just a simple decay rate where we have no additional source of death for the X, and we can identify that exponential minus mu E T minus pi is the proportion of X initially present at the breeding site at time pi that are still present at X at this current time T. Now, we will let the probability that the X at the breeding site will remain on hash T units of time after they were laid. So Q of T can, between the time interval T minus pi, the expected number of X E pi of T now takes the form which is shown here. We have that adjustment by the Q of T minus pi. So the survival probability is actually Q of T e to the minus mu E. The real challenge here is to find a probability distribution for Q, which we can use for this modeling process. If the mosquito of type R return to the breeding site and lay eggs at rate lambda V of R, then the total number of R eggs that are laid per unit time will be that quantity there, A lambda V times R. And we can integrate the total number of eggs over all eggs that are laid from between time pi and time T to that formula 1 that we are showing here. So that gives us the expected number of eggs that we can find at the breeding site that remains as X and are being replenished by mosquitoes of type R over the interval T from pi to T. Now, to continue with this work, we can assume that pi is 0, so we'll start at time T equals 0, and let T subscript E be the maturation time for X, the length of time that it takes for X to mature. Then we can divide that integral into 2 parts. The parts that start from E0, from 0 to T minus E, and the parts that start from T minus E to T. We are doing this division because it is very clear that if the maturation time for X is TE, then for T greater than TE, Q of T will be 0. Since the maturation time for X is TE, if Q of T has a uniform distribution, then we'll have that the eggs remain on hatch up to time with probability 1 for T between 0 and TE, and it will hatch afterwards. And so it means that Q of T minus nu is going to take that form there. And if Q of T is non-uniform, we can also adjust that formula accordingly. And therefore, with that, we can write the expected number of eggs that are laid at the breeding site, that are there at the breeding site T as X from T, between T minus E to T by the formula 5, if we have a uniform distribution, or by formula 6, if we have a non-uniform distribution. And so we have here the expectation that we want. What we did was just to apply Leibniz rule for differentiation under the integral sign to differentiate, to find the rate of change of E with respect to T, to have these three terms in equation 7. The first term represent the eggs that have not been hatched. The second term represents the eggs that have hatched, and the last term represents the eggs that have died. And so we'll interpret the second term there as the new larvae